Hi everyone, Ainsley here from Small Fry Creations, and today we're building a fold-away balcony bar. Let me show you how we did it. Our balcony bar is going to be made from some beautiful Blackbutt decking timber that is 130mm wide, and the bar top is made of 3 of these panels, and they're going to be cut to 2 meters long, which I'm going to cut first. Now, because I'm cutting across the grain, I'm going to use some blue painter's tape, and that will hopefully just prevent any tear out. Once we've got those 3 panels cut, then we can start talking about the back panel.
The bar, in theory, is quite simple, but what I think makes this bar beautiful is the timber and the little attention to details. I spent some time going through the pieces to work out what pieces went best together and marked up what pieces would be used for what.
The 3 pieces that make up the bar top have already been cut to size, and I've set them aside, and we're going to come back to those later on. Now I want to focus on the back panel. So I've got 3 pieces of my decking timber, which has already been rough cut to 2100. And I'm going to go ahead and cut off the rounded edges, because when I glue it up, I want it to look like one seamless panel. Well, that's the plan anyway. Also, one of these boards is going to have to be ripped down because I don't need it as wide as it currently is. I'm shooting for an overall height of 330mm. Now these boards are long, so we're going to have to put up the garage door to get this job done, and then we can talk about the glue up and the glue that we're going to be using to glue these boards together.
Originally, when I designed the bar, I was going to cut down one of the pieces to not be as wide, but as I was ripping the rounded edges off, I decided it would look better if all 3 panels stayed the same width, so I didn't end up cutting down any boards. Leaving the boards at 2100 means I can cut everything to length after the glue up, and I don't need to worry about having the boards perfectly aligned during the glue up.
I'm getting set up to glue up this back panel, and I'm really taking my time. I'm dealing with 2.1 meters of timber, and I want to make sure that this is as flat as it possibly can be, because I do not want to have to spend a whole day sanding it. So I've grabbed every clamp that I've got in the workshop, and I plan on using every single one of them. I was doing some research before I started this project in relation to glue, because there are some Australian hardwood timbers out there that are quite oily, and regular wood glue will not work with them. Now, Blackbutt has mixed reviews online. Some people say you can use regular wood glue, some people say you need to use something like a polyurethane glue. And if you have watched my video on copper pipe basics, you will know that I absolutely hate the polyurethane glue. The cleanup is horrendous, and it's a glue that I hope that I have to use very little of in the future. Some people in the know have suggested to me that I use Type Bond 3, so this is what I'm going to go with. This should have all of the properties of the polyurethane glue with none of the side effects. That's what I'm hoping. We'll soon put it to the test and find out. I'm going to go ahead and continue to get set up. I'm going to have some coals also in here to make sure that it stays as flat as possible, and then we can get to gluing up this big board.
Spoiler alert, the Type Bond 3 glue worked perfectly, and this will be my go-to glue for projects like this in the future. When clamping up big panels like this, the plywood pieces wrapped in packing tape work to keep the boards even, and applying clamps on the top and the bottom keep the panel from warping.
Our back panel is in glue up, so while that's drying, we can move on to some of the other parts of the balcony bar. This was the prototype that I took to the client's house to measure and make sure that everything was going to work as we anticipated it. This panel here is the back panel that we currently have got gluing up. So now I need to cut these 3 pieces here that are going to make up the section that actually hook onto the balcony, and then once we can get that back panel out of the glue up, we can glue this top section together, because that's wider than one of the boards that I have. So we'll go ahead and get those cut, and then we can move on to the next glue up.
You'll notice with this project, it's a lot of rinse and repeat. I left the back panel in glue up for a couple of hours and then took it out of clamps so I could glue up the top section. Once that had been in glue up for a couple of hours, I could take that out and start to sand everything flat. Taking my time in the glue up meant the sanding was fairly easy. The balcony in particular that I was working with called for some supports on the back, as the top of the balcony sat out past the balcony support post, so in order for the bar to sit flat, some supports were needed on the back. It just worked out that 2 pieces glued together was the perfect depth, so that was my next step.
I've spent the morning sanding all of the pieces up to 220 grit with raising the grain with water in between the grits and sanding everything back. And every piece now is ready to be cut to its final length, which is 2 meters. But there's just something quickly I want to run over. Having this prototype has been really handy just to visualize and think through the design. And there is something that I'm going to change. If we imagine the balcony wall is running, or the balcony fence is running through here, and this is going to hook on. Originally, I had this top piece running along with the back piece butting up into it. And if we think about it, all of the weight is on this top piece in a downward motion. So I don't think having that joint is going to be very strong or the best decision, just because then it's really pulling away from the joint. I just don't think that's going to be best. So I've switched this joint around, so the back plate will now run all the way up and this top piece is going to butt into it. So then that way, with the downward motion, it is going to be glued and screwed. It would mean that the screws would have to bend in order for that joint to come apart, which is highly unlikely. So I think that is going to be a better decision and something that I'm going to change when I put everything together. So I can go ahead and get all of these pieces to cut, and then we can start to bring the balcony bar together. All of my pieces are now cut to length and to width, so we're now up to the fun part, which is assembling the balcony bar. And to do this, I'm going to use glue and screws. And I could just countersink the screws, have them sitting on top of the timber, and it probably would be just fine. But I want to go one step further and try and improve my skills, and I want to hide the screws. Now, yes, you could just countersink and put a dowel into the timber. That probably would be fine, but again, it's probably going to stand out. So I have purchased from eBay these things called plug cutters, which essentially make dowels from offcuts of the timber that you're using. So that means that you can better match the plug to the timber that you're using and hopefully completely cover up the screws so no one can see them. So I'm going to install my plug cutter into my drill press, go ahead and cut some plugs from some offcut of the timber.
I'll leave links in the description box below for the plug cutters that I purchased. It's the best $17 I have spent, as I feel like this detail raises the finished product to the next level. The process to put together what I will call the hook section of the bar would go like this. I used a Forstner bit the same size of the plugs to drill 10mm down. I would then follow with a small drill bit to pre-drill all the holes to avoid splitting. Using 40mm hardwood outdoor screws, I would screw the pieces into place. Using the same Type 13 glue, I could then glue the plugs in. When gluing the plugs into place, I would pay special attention to the grain direction to match it with the plug to better hide them. After a couple of hours, I could come back with the flush trim saw and cut the plugs flush.
The piece that I'm measuring up at the moment is this bottom piece here for the screw holes, and what I want to be really careful of is to make sure that I offset the screws from where I put the last ones, because I'm only dealing with small amounts of timber and I don't want the screws to run into each other. So I've offset everything by 50mm, and that should work.
Now let's sit back and enjoy this bar coming to life. With all the plugs cut flush, it was time to grab out the sander and sand everything flush and smooth. When it came to putting together the bar top section, I clamped the boards together with 3mm spacers, which will allow the rain to move through if left up, and I also think it breaks up the design, which is nice. I cut 50mm pieces from the Blackbutt, and these will be the supports for the bar top. I had to be particular about where these were placed, as I needed them to be where the posts were on the balcony. I marked where all the screw holes would go and again drilled firstly for the plugs and then a small drill bit for the screw. It was a little tricky getting the supports into place, but having the top up on some scrap wood helped me get the supports in and square. The supports were also about 50mm shorter, so they didn't come all the way to the front. This was to try and hide them. I had 3 supports across the panel with screws from the top down, and then 2 supports on either end inset 50mm and screws from the bottom up to help draw the panels together, and hopefully this will also help with wood movement in the future. I put a small roundover on all the edges to make the bar nice to the touch and also safe for any small humans that may be running around.
My timber is all prepped and ready for its finish to be applied, and I wanted to run through what finish I'm going to go with. I spent a ton of time researching the best finish to go with because I didn't want to make the timber any browner than it already was. I really like the light timber and I wanted to keep as much of the light character as I possibly could. Now you could go with a marine poly, but the maintenance on that long term is insane. It would require every 12 or so months to sand the whole thing back and to reapply a new coat. I wanted to go with something that was better on the maintenance side, so an oil was the best way to go. On this test piece here at the bottom, you can see I've used some Aqua Deck just in its natural stain, but this just turned it a little bit too brown for my liking. A product online that did keep coming up as an option is your Osmo 420 UV protection, and it may have been a really good product, but it is crazy expensive, so just not a route I was prepared to go down. I kept researching and I came across this product called Aussie Clear Light, and this oil is actually made for your lighter timbers like the Blackbutt. And I've done a sample on this on the top part of this, and I'm really happy with how this has come up because it is much lighter. I hope it's showing up on camera, but it is much lighter than the regular decking oil. So that's the finish I'm going to go with. And then in terms of maintenance, every 12 or so months, all I need to do is clean the balcony bar down and then reapply a new coat of oil. So this is the finish we're going to go ahead with. We're going to apply one coat now, wait 24 hours, give it a light sand at 600 grit, and then come back with a second coat of oil. And then this guy is ready to be packed in the car and ready to be installed.
Allow me to pass on some knowledge I learnt while researching. Timber outside will last longer if the oil you're using has UV protection. However, the UV protection is generally added when the tint is added, and a lot of oils seem to have a high level of tint, which is causing the timber to turn quite brown. The Aussie Clear Light offers UV protection with only a small amount of tint, so the oil keeps the timber fairly true to the colour of the timber before oiling. At first the oil is quite yellow, but after a day of drying the oil settles to be a similar colour of the timber.
It is finally balcony delivery day, so we've got the car backed up and we are going to load the balcony bar into it. The most nerve-wracking thing is that it is still in technically pieces. I'm going to put it together on site just because of ease of transport. So we'll load up the car, get to the client's site and get this thing together and on the balcony.
Once on site, I pre-drilled the holes to secure the back support pieces into place. I used blue tape wherever I was drilling to avoid marking the timber and also stopping any tear out. With the support pieces installed, I could turn my attention to the folding brackets. I purchased these brackets from eBay and they are rated to 100 kilos per bracket, so that will be plenty strong for this application. These brackets are awesome and could be used in so many different scenarios. To help protect the balcony, we glued thin rubber to the back supports and also to the underside of the hook section of the bar, which will rest on the top of the balcony. It was then time to put the bar into place, sit back and enjoy the fruits of my labour.
The balcony bar is all installed and ready to be used, and it is such a great feeling to go from this, which was our prototype, to this, which is a working balcony bar. It is ready to have a meal on. I hope you have liked this video, and if you have, help me out by hitting those subscribe and like buttons, and I'll see you on the next one. Now let's enjoy this. Cheers.